Hello everybody, my name is Carol Garrison and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from White Bear Lake, Minnesota. I'm very excited to be sharing with you today the Endearing Beauty bundle of products that's available starting January 4th in the new mini catalog. This bundle of products is found on page 38 in the catalog. It includes this beautiful stamp set which has just this large floral image along with great sentiments, coordinating dies. Today I'll be using these two. And then the star of the bundle are these masks. This is a 5-layer mask, and it's what we're going to use to create some really beautiful cards. So let's jump right in here, and I'll show you a couple samples that I've made, and then we will finish this quartet of cards by using Melon Mambo. The first card is created using Azure Afternoon as my base color. This one is using Lemon Lolly as the base color, and finally Pumpkin Pie. I did use watercolor paper on this card and misted it, which gave it a slightly softer look with the colors from the masks, but it's just an option for you to use. So to create this card, you are going to need a 5.5 by 8.5 piece of cardstock. I'm using Melon Mambo and it is scored at 4 1/4. You'll need a piece of basic white cardstock for the floral image, and I am just using 4 by 5 1/4 because it fits the image and allows me to easily die cut it. And then I have another piece of 4 by 5 1/4 basic white cardstock that includes a layer of 1/2 by 5 1/4 inch Melon Mambo cardstock just to decorate the inside of my card. And then finally, I've got a piece of 3 3/4 by 5 inch basic white cardstock that I've run through using that dot 3D embossing folder that is part of the Basics 3D embossing folders that you can get in one of the online exclusives. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start by creating, creating my sentiment on the card because this has a couple steps to it. So I don't need to adhere that even. I am going to start by inking this up. I am choosing to use embossing powder on this card while I create my sentiment. And so in order to be able to get both my color ink as well as the embossing powder to stick, I am going to use a little bit of Versamark. This pad is discolored because I use it often for this technique, and I don't worry about it when I'm doing something where I don't want to have any other color staining it, anything like that. I will use a cleaner embossing pad, so just beware if you do that technique that you probably want to have a separate Versamark pad just so that you don't risk cross-contamination. All right. So I've stamped that image, and then I can take my clear embossing powder, and like many of you, I keep mine in a slightly larger container, and I've got just a little spoon in here, and I'm going to sprinkle my powder on, and then I will take this over and use my heat gun on that to heat up the embossing powder and get it nice and shiny. But through the magic of video cameras, I've got a finished item right here that we'll be using. And I've already used the die cut as well. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is grab our 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of cardstock, and I'm just going to line it up on the grid here so that it's fairly straight. Actually, I'm going to grab a damp cloth, wipe that off. It's a little gritty from the embossing powder. All right, we're going to put that here. And I am going to adhere it with a little bit of the washi tape, just so that it adheres and doesn't move once I start stamping and using my masks. Now I am using Memento ink on here, which means that my photopolymer stamp is going to be slightly stained. If you are concerned about that, you can try putting a little bit of Versamark or stamp it several times in a lighter color ink. Sometimes that can prevent some of the staining when you're using a black ink. However, I find that the staining actually helps me see the stamped image better, so I can create... now I am going to turn this around, and I'll explain the reason for that in just a second. I like being able to see a little bit the stamped image before I stamp it, just because it makes it easier for me. So a little bit of staining doesn't hurt. I do use a tissue when I'm doing big stamps like this and just kind of rub it all over the stamp. which helps me make sure that I get my image on there. All right, so we can set that aside. And then the next piece that we're going to do is simply start right in with our masking. Now, each of these masks are numbered 1 through 5, and so we're going to start with 1. And the reason I wanted to make sure that this particular flower was stamped in the direction that it is that it helps me line up my masks. I spent a lot of time the first few times I made this card trying to get it lined up and figure out even which direction I needed the mask to go. So that's just a little trick that I use. And then I use a couple more pieces of washi tape to hold my mask down while I'm doing it. And then finally, I'm using this glass mat, which is available as part of the join opportunity during celebration for new demonstrators. And I am just taking a Sharpie and writing directly on my glass surface this notch. And that way I'm going to be able to line up all of my future layers just fine. So I'm going to start by stamping my floral image in Bubble Bath. And I'm just using a blending brush and a piece of scratch paper to complete this process. And I kind of have a brush for my reds and a brush for my greens that I'm using today. So I'm getting some of the excess ink off, starting with my lighter colored ink, moving it in a circular, just wiping a little bit off. And then I'm going right to my mask, and I am starting on the hard part of the mask and going over the openings. That way I don't get one of those really dark starting marks that you can sometimes get with your blending brushes. And what's cool about this technique is each card you make is going to look a little bit different, simply because the weight of the ink, the amount of ink that you have on your brush is going to vary each time you're doing it. Now, typically, if I weren't filming this with a limited amount of time, I would have wiped that mask off with a very, very almost dry cloth to get the extra ink off. But today I am focused more on watching my time, and so I'm not going to take time for that step. Now the next layer is going to be for these leaves. So I'm going to line this notch up with that purple mark that I drew, and that's going to mean that I am pretty much going to be almost where I need to be with my mask when I put it on. All right, so then I'm going to do this next layer, which is the leaves, in olive green. Again, this is the lighter color that I'm starting with, and I'm working my way to darker colors. And so I do the same thing with my blending brush. Wipe off a little extra, kind of start just off of the opening and go over my leaves. And if you feel like your ink is changing colors too much, you are always able to add more ink to it. I have found that the way I ink my blending brushes, usually I can get the whole thing done without having to do that. But if you find that you need to, that's not a problem. So we will peel this layer off, and this was layer number 2. And we're going to move over to layer number 3. And this is the one that's going to add some of the dark accents to the flowers. And so again, I'm going to focus on getting my notch lined up and then making sure that I'm pretty close to where I need to be on here. I don't have solid lines to match up on this layer because we are simply adding texture and detail to this card at this point. And so now I'm going to come in with my Melon Mambo, and I will ink that up with my blending brush, wipe that off just a little bit, and then starting on the hard plastic, I will work my way over and just go across all of the openings. And we're done with that layer. So we will repeat the process, peeling up our tape, moving the layer aside and grabbing layer number 4. And this is going to be our accent pieces. And this actually still has some that are a little bit white, the stems of the leaves. And so again, by lining that notch up and then looking at where everything else is in place, it's very easy to get everything lined up. My final color for my leaves is going to be Mossy Meadow. And so I will ink up my blending brush, get a little of the extra off, and now I'm just going to go again in a circular motion, making sure to get all of the open areas on the mask. I had never used a mask before I started this, and I will tell you it's very easy to learn, and it creates a really cool look. I have tried to duplicate it with colored pencils, blends, and things like that, and you can do it. It's just, this is so easy. And finally, we're already up to layer number 5. So again, I'm going to match that notch up, and this is just going to add some color to our flowers. And I have found that you don't really have to work to match up the dots. It gives it a slightly different look. And the openings don't match directly with those dots. So don't worry about getting it perfection. This is just going to add one more layer of color, and focus to make sure that you are very close on that wedge there. Close my ink pad because I nearly added Mossy Meadow again to this layer. So this next layer is Berry Burst, and again I'm going to repeat the process. Wipe any excess off, and these, there's just a few spots. So we've got our openings, and we are now done coloring our flowers. And so let me peel off, and here's our final stamped image with the coloring. So then the next thing I'm going to do is take my cut and emboss machine and the coordinating die, and I will die cut it. But again, through the power of cameras and filming, it is already done. So I've got that ready to go along with my sentiment. I'm going to just take the cloth that comes with this glass mat, and I can just go right over where I got my permanent marker, and it'll take that right off. Now if you don't have a mask like this, you can just do that mark right on a piece of paper. It doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and get our card assembled. The first thing we're going to do is fold the base in half, and then take our bone folder and burnish along the score line. And then I am going to add adhesive to the back of this card base, or this card inside piece, which I've already decorated, and we'll adhere that. If ever your tape runner isn't putting tape out, just run it across the back of your hand, and boom, you'll have tape again. Quick little tip. And I'm just going to add a couple little pieces right there. This will line the inside of your card, and I look to make sure that my opposite corners are fairly even, because if these corners are even, then these corners will be even. And now I've got that centered, so you can see the little decor I put by running it through that embossing folder. And now we're on to the front of the card. So I've got my basic white cardstock that I've embossed already, and again I'm going to add adhesive to it. When I've used one of our 3D folders, I do like to add a little bit more adhesive because sometimes they can pull away. And so this is going on the front of our card. And again, if opposite corners are even, it should be pretty centered all the way around. And there we go with that. And then this is the image that we're going to put on there. Now I have already added dimensionals, and I've put a lot on, especially at the end of each flower. And I've removed the backing because I'm assuming pretty much everybody knows how to do that part already, and it's not a lot of fun to watch. So we're going to put that onto the front of the card here. And then I like to use Wink of Stella on many of my projects. And so I'm just coming in with my brush kind of in the center of each of these flowers with my Wink of Stella brush. And that just adds a little more sparkle. That's all. And then I'm going to take my sentiment, and on this one it's going down here in this corner, but part of it will be going on top of where I've already got this popped up on dimensionals. So I've added dimensionals to the end that will sit here, adhesive to the end that's going to be on the part that's already popped up, and then one little dimensional in the corner to make sure that it also sits up at the same level. So we'll just attach that to the front of our card. And we're going to finish this card off then with the glossy dots. And we'll put one there. I'm going to put a large one up here in between my dots, so I'm sure that it sticks well. And then we'll put one right over here. And that's our finished card. And now we've got our fourth card. Wouldn't this make a lovely gift set for someone? So you've got 4 brightly colored cards using that mask, and it's just a great, great tool to add. If you haven't tried it, give it a shot. Thanks everyone for watching, and be sure to check out the other videos that are part of this catalog launch. Bye-bye.